everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's AVST Live webinar. This is Ann Rood with AVST Marketing. Today our topic is secure messaging, and we have Neil Butler who's going to walk us through the presentation. But before Neil gets started, I just want to draw your attention to a couple of things. Number one, you can download the slides in the handouts area on the webinar panel if you want to take a look at those. We will also send them out in a follow-up email later today, as well as a link to the recording. And of course, we have time for questions at the end. You're welcome to type your questions in at any time. And also, just real quickly, we are giving away a couple of sets of Plantronics headphones, the Backbeat Fit. So that was in the email invite, and if you are one of the lucky winners, you'll get an email from me later today. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Neil.
Thank you, Ann. You know, what are the odds after all these webinars I've done that I wouldn't have won one of those headsets already? But I guess not. Welcome, everybody. This is one of our regular webinars that we run. There's obviously, for anyone in an enterprise, a major interest in security. So we're going to go ahead and focus on that. And there's some new things in here that I think those of you who are security conscious will be happy to see. And we always like to start kind of defining, why it is we think you should spend your time coming to see us. And it really just has to do with our history. We've been here a long time, and we've been focused right in this space. When this space started for us, of course, it was voicemail, and now it's grown to much more than that. Unified communications is much broader than that. But there's still a lot of the same concepts in there, and we've been lucky in that we've been able to grow our product through that 35 years and flesh it out in terms of the environment that it supports as well as the solutions that you can use. And that's made us a pretty significant player in this market, and that's good because the more enterprise customers that we deal with, the more experience we get with security, and the more we learn what's really required out there. If you're familiar with our platform at all, you probably know we sort of break it down into different categories. Interoperability is a big one for us. We're not owned by a switch vendor or a PBX manufacturer or anyone else. Therefore, we like to think that our product can go anywhere into any environment and go into that environment without requiring giant forklift upgrades, which is not something most people are really looking to do. And then we have our core platform that's the voice piece where we started years ago. And then we've been focusing on mobility over the years. We'll talk a little bit about some of these, but mostly we're going to function on the security side. And for us, the security side is primarily going to be about messaging. There's certainly a lot of security side when it comes to the phone system and outside connectivity, and also the server hardening and things along those lines. But those are sort of standard with every server that you have within the enterprise. So we're definitely going to focus on the piece that we do, and that will mostly have to do with messaging. So let's go ahead and kind of look at the environment we're going to be talking about. We do a lot of different kinds of messaging. We have different kinds of message stores. Messages end up in different places. We connect to different devices for access of messages. We connect to different environments. And one of our goals is for our feature set to be normalized across anybody's environment. So we'd like to deliver all the same features to you if you're using an Avaya PBX or if you're using Skype for Business as your phone system. We'd like to be able to do the same kind of things from a secure point of view if you're using Exchange or your message store, or you're using our own message store for kind of the highest level of security. That's our goal here, is regardless of your environment, let's talk about secure messaging. Now, secure messaging is kind of an interesting concept in terms of, most companies have not really secured their voice lines all that well. There is security in the SIP world, but it's not really as strong of security as we see in the data world for the enterprise. But messaging goes into that data world because now you have something that's stored, and now your requirements for security change. They get much more complex, but they also get a little simpler to do in terms of talking about that message and how we would protect it. So we have a lot of different pieces here that we put together to look at secure messaging. Mostly, the risk for security for messages have to do with getting them when you go in with a client, or when somebody can go in through a client interface and get the messages. Assuming that people want their messages not to go outside their enterprise, and they want some level of security involved in that, then what we've done is we've changed the way we do messaging in general. So you certainly start with security by deciding where you're going to store your messages. If we store your messages in your groupware package, so we put them in Exchange, Office 365, Gmail, whatever your groupware package is, then most of the security from a messaging side is going to be done by that product. Once we put those messages in, we lose a certain amount of control over it. There's a few things we can see, and we'll talk about these here in a second. But mainly we're going to look at, if you store your messages on our server, what we can continue to do to make them secure. And so we'll start by looking at the devices. One of the most popular devices today, of course, is a mobile device, and we have native mobile clients for both iPhone and Android, and those clients do lots of things. We'll look at a couple of things beyond messaging that they do at the end of this presentation. But basically, if you look at this as a message access tool, then that's one of the first points where you have to look at from a secure point of view. Now, some of our competitors download the messages to the mobile device, and you can play the messages from the mobile device, you can delete them, etc. We didn't think that was the way to go. Once they're on that mobile device stored, then they're at risk. Somebody could pick up your phone you left behind in Starbucks, break it, and get to that information. If it truly is confidential information, then it's at risk. So what we've done, if you store messages on CX and you use our mobile client, we will show you the message header list. That's what's showing here. When you pick a specific message to play, we will download that message across the data connection, which is secure. We will play that to the user. We'll let the user forward it to another user. We'll let the user delete it or save it. They can't get it out of the system. There's no forwarding it to an email address. There's no local file cache they can get to. As soon as they leave that message page, the copy of that message that we used to play is removed. So if you leave your device sitting somewhere, the message screen backs out 20 seconds, 30 seconds later, there's no messages on there. And that's also true with your call list and your directory and things like that we use. We're very big on maintaining that security for the device. The device is the biggest risk within an enterprise in terms of, because of its portable nature and the fact that they keep falling out of our pockets somewhere. So with this client, you're going to get a highly secure way to deploy voice messages to a user on a mobile device, and basically it's going to be secure from cradle to grave. And the way our mobile client works is you put some software on one of your web servers. We don't install web servers on our product directly. And so that data network that you've already secured is actually what's used to deliver those secure messages. And that's as good as it gets out in the voice messaging world in terms of maintaining security while giving a wide array of access. I mean, it's important for people to be able to get to their messages when they're out and about. A lot of us don't spend that much time at our desk, and having mobile access to messages is important. We do sort of the same thing, although we do it in a slightly different way with our user web client. So we have that mobile client, which by the way is a free client. If you have our system, you just go out and put that client in, and from a messaging point of view, everything you get is free. And we'll talk about what else that client does in a second. What we also have is a free user web client. So same thing, on one of your web servers, you install this web application, which we call Web Phone Manager. And it does a lot of things. It lets users maintain their mailbox settings, look at their distribution lists, record their names and greetings, change their availability, all of that. But on the messaging side, if your messages are stored on CX, then you'll have an inbox like you see here, and you'll be able to see your messages. And what you're looking at there are voice and fax messages that are stored on CX. They are not going to be copied down at all. In this mode, where you can see the little player icon there, player bar, when you click play, we stream that message to your PC, play it over your PC speakers, but that's it. We don't even move a local cache copy down. So the same thing applies here. You can listen to that message, you can forward it to other people on your system, and there's no way to get the message out of the system with our clients and the way we're attaching. Now both of those, the mobile phone and the web client, do exactly what the telephone interface does. In other words, the things you can do over the phone when you call into voicemail, that's what we're providing here. And that's an important distinction, because in cases where there are regulations and rules you're trying to follow, and I think of things like HIPAA and in the health industry and FERPA in education, and to a certain extent Sarbanes-Oxley, and now what you have is sometimes you need to justify what you've done in a messaging environment, and this is easy to justify because it only does what phone voicemail has always done. So no one can say you've put your clients at risk. No one can say you've put confidential patient information at risk by deploying either the mobile or the web client, because they're just doing what the telephone does. Makes it very easy to have those discussions. Now that mobile client does actually do more than just messaging. When you get a mailbox on CX, you can go download that client and you will get the secure messaging that we're talking about, plus the mailbox setting and admin type of functionality. But there is an additional license, a personal assistant license, that gives you a whole world of other applications, mostly having to do with call completion. And we'll look at those separately towards the end of the presentation. So if we look at secure messaging, there's a lot of things that we do. You may not be storing your messages on our server. You may actually be storing them in Exchange. And if you're storing them in Exchange, then the basic message security does fall down to the Exchange server and the settings that your administrator has put on that. And those are actually pretty hard to give you very solid security. But what we can do, in light of the fact that certain people have asked us over the years, if I mark a voice message private, and that can be from an internal or an external caller, can mark a message as private. Over the telephone, when you listen to a private message, you can't forward it. You can listen to it, delete it, save it, but you can't forward it. And what we've done in the Exchange world is set that up so that if you actually have a message and it's marked private and you're using Exchange as your message store, then what we'll actually do is send a message into Exchange referencing that voicemail but not including the audio. And it'll basically say you need to call back and get your message over the telephone. While before we used to pass the private flag to Exchange, and Exchange recognized that flag and put the little mark on it, it didn't mean anything. You could still forward it from the email client, etc. So we have a way to actually tie that down. Now the last piece for us to get around to, and this was something that nobody really concerned themselves with until the last few years, is actually securing the message at rest. So we've always done the clients secure. In the last 3 years, we've made sure that all the on-the-wire messaging piece is secure. And what we're doing in the next software release, 9.0, is actually allowing you to encrypt the data store when they're on CXE. And what that means is you will truly have cradle-to-grave encryption. A caller calls in. If you've set up your phone system for secure SIP, then it's secured on the wire. We record it. We put it in our data store. It's secure. User goes to one of our clients, either the mobile client or the telephone client, or the web client, and when they get that message out, it's secure there as well. So by the time we get to 9.0, we will finally have completed the entire life cycle of a message in a secure fashion. And more we're hearing about this encryption at rest. Now it's interesting, there was a big push for security on the wire years ago. Now we don't control the wire. I mean, the telephone conversation happens on several other environments, and then it gets to us, and we can't really control whether it gets to us secured or not. But what we have done is added support so that if the enterprise wants to secure the network and the wire, and they want to use TLS and secure RTP, then we allow that connection and support that connection so that that last leg of the conversation inside the enterprise can be secure as well. Anytime we're sending messages to a cloud-based system, they're secure. Even when we're using Gmail, we use secure SMTP to send that message out. Anytime you're viewing messages from our clients, they're typically using SSL for security. So we have locked down the message side of it pretty much as tight as it can be. So we talked a little bit about that mobile client. On its own, it gives you the messaging functionality, which is great. But what it also does is it allows you it empowers the user to control their environment a lot better. Outgoing phone calls, there's some functionality there. It's pretty much what you'd expect. But from an incoming phone call point of view, we've done a lot of things with the mobile side. And one of the most impressive is the call screening that we offer. So one of the things we know is for those of us that sit in meetings all day, and or even meetings for any significant amount of time, we all bring our device in and we sit there doing our very best to be attentive in the meeting, but we're still glancing down at our mobile device every now and then, and we're triaging email. We know for a fact that for many people, an important enough email will cause you to get out of that meeting, and that kind of communications and availability is really expected in today's work environment. But for telephone calls, that's never worked out. Very few people are going to stop a meeting in the middle and say, hold on, let me answer this phone call and see who it is. And then when they do answer it, very few are going to be brave enough to tell the caller, oh, it's only you. Yeah, you're not important enough for me to take this call right now because I'm doing something else. You'll have to call me back. That's just not how it's worked. So typically, for years, people have simply ignored the phone when they're in meetings, and then they come back and basically the light's on their phone and they get the call and find out what's going on. What we've done to make that a little better experience is we've set up a way to screen calls when you're in a meeting silently and process those calls in a number of ways. And this is our mobile client that we talked about. If you buy the personal assistant license, we will now be able to set up a user so that when they get a call through our system, we will send a pop-up to their phone, and that's the screen on the left. And if indeed that person is in your contacts or on your system, you'll see who it is, what company it is, and that's kind of the important piece for a phone call. That's really how you make the decision whether you would take that call or not, is by knowing the caller's identity. So I could look at that and say, oh, John Smith, yeah, I'm not really doing anything important with him right now. I'll just hit the reject button. He'll go to voicemail. I'll just keep going at the meeting. Or I could look at that and say, John Smith, it's my lawyer. I'm waiting for really important information on this merger we're doing. Hit the accept button, step out of the meeting perhaps, and by then your phone's ringing, and you can take that call. So those are two nice options, but we figured we could take it further than that. So we have an options button, and if you hit the options button, you have several other choices. Let's start with record acknowledgement. If you hit record acknowledgement, you get a little recorder bar, and you can hit that button and say, yeah, listen, John, I'm just going into a meeting. I'll be there about 20 minutes. I'll call you as soon as I get out of the meeting. Then you go back to the meeting. And basically, John hears, Neil Butler was unable to take this call and recorded you this brief message, and then plays the message to John. So it gives him a callback expectation. Or you could tell him in that message to call someone else for the information, things along those lines. The one above that is the silent version of the same thing. The select acknowledgement. If you hit select acknowledgement, you'll get the screen on the far right. You hit we'll call in 15 minutes and go back to the meeting. And John hears, Neil Butler was unable to take your call, but we'll call you back in 15 minutes. So you can actually silently acknowledge a customer right while you're in the middle of a meeting as well. And then the transfer device would let you transfer it to another phone. So this is fixed mobile convergence. Perhaps you answered this call walking down the hall. You hit transfer to device, you hit your desk phone, and now when you walk into your office, the call's ringing there, so you don't have to hold your mobile phone up for a half an hour. Or you could transfer it to another person. Or you could actually hit accept and record, which would give you the call, and then it would record the contents of that call as a message into your mailbox. So powerful call management tools come from that same mobile client that we're using to deliver secure messaging. If you look at kind of the voice messaging and call processing features that we use, we've been doing this a long time, and I don't think there's much in the way of the voice messaging world that we don't do. We sort of tell people, as far as we know, every feature in that legacy system you have, we support, so we'll be able to move it over and probably improve on it. And the improvements are some of the things like we're talking about today with the security. And we offer the alternate telephone user interfaces to make that move painless, or relatively painless. Move to another system is never completely painless. So on a secure messaging side, kind of to do the last piece of the security, private voice messages cannot be forwarded internally or externally. We talked about that. We restrict the web client and the stream to the mobile client. We support the encryption on the wire. We also have strong passwords, by the way, which I assume most people are used to in these days. And then the last thing that's not on this slide, because it's not quite real yet, is the Release 9.0 secured message store itself. So personal assistant basically is something we throw a little bit of conversation in all our webinars, because it's one of the things that's happening right now that almost everybody should at least get a look at it as they make decisions going forward on what they're going to do within their infrastructure. You know, we hear a lot about from the data companies where, you know, voice is going away and it's not important and we're going to get rid of our email system, and a lot of talk, but you know, as long as people want to shout at other people, I think the telephone call will be there and be a strong contender. And interestingly enough, in surveys, when people are away from their desk, that's still the second most popular thing. They'll do email, then they'll call a person down the hall, and then maybe they'll walk down. Externally, the phone is still number one. It's just so handy to have that phone. The more you can do with your phone. And if you look at our personal assistant license, it takes that phone and extends it out to be more of a virtual desktop. It ties it to your contacts, for example. So I can listen to a message from somebody, internal or external, and forward that message out to somebody that's in my contacts. So I could have my schedule people call me, leave me a voicemail that said, yeah, we're not going to be able to do Friday, we're going to have to do Monday, and then I could forward that message out to someone in my contacts, maybe the customer, just to say, and I put a voice announcement on, hi, here's a message from scheduling, we're going to have to move that out till Monday. So the ability to do all those things you can do at your desktop come from the phone system's ability to be controlled a lot better with our software. The incoming part is one of the things that almost everyone I talk to is really surprised to hear about this, because not too many other people really understand that it can be out there. When a call comes in, the odds right now, and I'm not making this number up, but please don't ask me to verify it, because it's one I've heard several times this year. Somebody ran a study that said 28% of calls that come into an enterprise get to the right person first time in. All the rest of them get lost, hang up at the operator, leave voice messages, etc. There's nothing wrong with having a good voicemail system, but man, it's just so much nicer if you can increase call completion, and that personal assistant piece we talked about will actually do that. And we do that not relying on the end user, because they won't really do anything to make this happen, but we rely on context within the enterprise. And context can be your calendar. When a call comes in for you, we can read your calendar, find out where you are. Maybe we trigger that pop-up when you're in a meeting because we know you have your mobile device with you, or maybe we send it straight to voicemail. Maybe we send it to a different device if you're in a meeting. All those are possible. Same thing with your Microsoft Link or Skype status. We can change how we route calls and what devices we route calls to based on that. We have our own schedule that's very popular, and probably the most impressive piece is our location routing capabilities. I always am very careful to tell customers we do not know where the end user is. You can't run a report and say, where is my user today? But we do allow the user, once the administrator turns this feature on, to define certain locations that we can use in call routing. So how this would work: you would go into the office, you would go to our mobile client, you would define the location office, it would go out to the cell towers, ping 3 cell towers to triangulate, come back. We now know when that mobile device is in that location. We don't tell anybody. The device knows it, but it doesn't report on it. But if I have a call routing rule that says, if he's at his desk, send the call to his desk phone. If he's not, send it to his mobile phone. What I'm going to do is when that rule gets triggered, I'm going to ping the mobile device and just say, is this person at that location defined for work? And if it comes back no, then we move on to the next call list. If it comes back yes, then we know how to send the call. And then you could go home and build another one at home, another one in your second office. And basically, most of us throughout the day have different devices that we tend to use. We tend to use our mobile device when we're out and about. We tend to use our telephone on our desk, mostly when we're at the desk. And maybe when we're sitting in a Starbucks, doing some reading, we use a soft phone on our iPad. And by having control over all that information, our system is able to do amazing things with increasing call completion. And basically, call comes in, we could have overrides in place. The user at any time can put an override in place to say, despite the fact my calendar says I'm in a meeting, I'm really down the hall here, and send the calls to this phone. We can have automatic overrides based on that context we talked about, their presence, their calendar, and their location. And then all of those point to various rules and lists of devices, lists of telephones, in terms of how I want to send that call to. And even if all you use is your instant messaging and your calendar to create a simple rule that says, in the office, send it to my desk phone, out of the office, send it to my mobile phone, and then couple that with our schedule that says from 6:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night, I'll accept calls. After that, they go to voicemail. You've created an application that will be much better received than one that rings calls somewhere all the time, and it'll increase call completion. Probably the most important thing you could do in terms of productivity with the personal assistant is include the speech rec interface for the users. Basically, this is what creates your virtual desktop. This is how you can, I climb in my car every morning and hit my Bluetooth button and it says, hello, Neil Butler, what would you like to do? And I say, what are my meetings for today? And it tells me my meeting. And what are my new messages? And it'll play me my new email messages and voice messages and tell me if I have any fax messages as well. I can go build a new appointment on the calendar. I can be listening to a message, get a tone in my ear that somebody's calling me, take that call hangs up, I'm still in my system, I go right back to where I was listening to my messages. So a very powerful virtual desktop environment, primarily, let's face it, for when we're in the car. The automated attendant functionality is very similar in terms of from a call completion point of view. We have the most powerful automated attendant out there. It's easy to say that because as well as doing everything that every legacy automated attendant does, and a lot of things beyond what they do, we have a custom tool that will actually let us build what you want in automated attendant. You know, you give us a rule, you give us information to access, and we can route calls based on all of that. And particularly in larger enterprises where we're looking at consolidation, right? A lot of people saw their data infrastructures consolidated in the last 5 to 10 years, recognized an incredible savings in ongoing TCO based on doing that, decided let's do that in the telephony world. And that was a little harder to do, but a lot of people are well down the road to doing that. But that brings up some challenges. Like if you take 5 or 6 locations in 5 or 6 different cities and tie them together into one large phone system, which is easy to do, you now start having some unique new problems having to do with where the users are relative to what part of the system they're on. And that has to do with things like, you know, if you have Chicago and LA tied together, you still have individual lines coming into the system. When somebody goes into the automated attendant and says John Tyler, you probably only want to look at the John Tylers connected to that location. So location-based directories, location-based dial by name, that type of thing. We've really taken the call completion piece and spent a lot of our time working on it because we do believe it's at least as important as the voice messaging piece. So we've looked at a lot of things here. Security is certainly the prime focus on this, but in order to do security, we've had to go through all the different applications we have that touch a call or touch a message and make sure that we can meet the security requirements of the customers. And I want to say one last time, remember that encrypted store is not available today. It's in the 9.0 product. It's working today in our test system, so we're comfortable talking about it, but it won't be available probably, I don't know, 3 months to 5 months, somewhere in that neighborhood, I would guess. So now we come to questions.
Thanks very much, Neil. Okay, we have a few questions already in the queue. If you have a question that you have not submitted yet, you can find the question box toward the bottom. If your screen, your webinar panel may be minimized, use the orange arrow in the upper corner to expand it. So Neil, first question, does a caller hear that you rejected their call?
No. What the caller would typically hear would be ringing. It would answer. They would say your name or dial your name, or it might be a forwarded DID call. And then while we're holding that call, you have your choice of playing music to it, playing announcements to it, etc. And then what happens when you make the decision is it just comes back and says, Neil Butler is currently not available. And then it tells them what other options they have.
Okay, thank you. Next question. This one, actually, I think this one came in toward the beginning, so you may have answered it, but I'll ask it anyway just in case. Can you forward or record a message from the mobile client?
Yes, you can forward a message from the mobile client, but only to other users on the system, right? That's part of the security features and functionality. Now, an administrator can set a system to turn off security system-wide on the mobile client, in which case you would play that mobile client and you then could get a hold of the attachment and do something with it. But in typical scenario, you can forward a message, but only to other users. What was the second part besides forwarding?
Can you record a message from the mobile client?
Yes. Now, the way you do that is there's a special button that takes you into your mailbox to record the message. We don't actually record the message on the device and move it into the mailbox. We connect the user into the system where they record the message.
Okay, next, what is the current version of CXE, and does secure messaging work on version 8.2?
So some of it would be in 8.2. We are currently on 8.7 software update 3. To get everything we talk about except for the encrypted store, you'd have to go to at least 8.7, and to go to 8.7, you would go to 8.7 update 3.
Okay.
If they want to contact us offline, I will put together a list based on their current software version of what they do have access to.
Okay, sure. We can follow up on that one. Next, are the call completion settings customizable by the user?
Some percentage of them are. Most of our features for users work in the same way, and that is in the subscriber mailbox, the administrator enables the feature. And then there's quite often a second setting that says, I not only enable this, but I enable the user to maintain it, in which case it shows up in Web Phone Manager and on the mobile client as something they can change. Let me give you an example. If I want notification in email when I get a voicemail, I'm not going to put my voicemails in there because from a security point of view, I don't want to do that, but I do want to know when I get a voicemail. We can set our system up to send an email into the voicemail. And so the administrator would enable that and program the user's email address in it. We also could say, send an attachment of it. Maybe you have contractors who don't actually get on your system, but you want them to be able to receive voicemail messages. I then have another checkbox that would say the user can change these settings. Now, when the user went into Web Phone Manager, they would see that message notification feature. They could change the email address if that was allowed. They could change whether the file is attached, whether that was allowed. So you have the full spectrum of nothing to everything, including the user being able to change all those settings. So there is a lot of settings that users can change.
Okay, great. Let's see, next question. Is there a way to encrypt voicemail with another partner we do business with? Do they need any encryption keys on their side?
So if you're talking about encrypting them at rest that's coming out, that'll be something we do at the server level. It won't involve anyone else. I can't think of a case where any encryption we'd be involved with would require keys from anyone else.
Okay. And another question, can a call be transferred to a person who is on a different system where both systems are also connected to the AVST platform?
Yeah, there's a couple of possibilities there. In many cases, when we connect an AVST to maybe 4 locations for a company, they have their own capabilities. So I could answer in the Chicago branch and transfer to somebody in the LA branch, and I could do that. The primary way we do it is through telephony connection. So those 2 sites are tied together with SIP trunks or T1 or something along those lines. But it is possible to bridge calls where a call comes in on one port and the decision is made by the application for whatever reason that we have to make an outgoing phone call that we can't reach through some sort of PBX connection. We can grab another port, make that outgoing call, and bridge the 2 together. We're very careful about doing that. There's security implications and things, but it is possible.
Okay, it looks like that wraps up the questions actually, so we'll go ahead and conclude here. Just want to thank everyone for joining, and a quick reminder, we will send out an email later today which will include a link to the slides as well as a link to the recording. And just want to again thank everyone for joining, and I'll let Neil give a quick goodbye as well.
Yes, thank you, everybody. You know, we understand it's a lot easier for Ann and I to be here than it is for you, because this is what's scheduled for our day. And the fact that so many people do take the time to come and listen to these webinars, we hope is an indication you're getting something valuable. If not, you really should get in touch with us. And you can always contact us at info@avst.com. And send us feedback about whether these are the webinars you'd like to see. Are they too long? Are they too short? Are there other subjects you'd like to see us cover? We really do drive this entire program based on that kind of feedback. So thanks everyone for attending.
Okay, thanks, Neil, and have a great day, everyone.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.